Jai Guruji, Shukrana Guruji. Going to read Light of Divinity, Day 2. A finger that points to the moon. I imagine a towering mountain and a blemishless mirror fused into one. Imagine, if you can, that this mountain was made of incandescent light, and imagine that you were put before this mountain, your breath frozen in your throat. You looked at it. This is what your first darshan of Guruji would be like. When he wills this meeting to happen, he will penetrate into the core of your being. You will be denuded of all pretension. Your soul will be exposed to his gaze, and when you see yourself in him, when you glimpse your own line like divinity, you will truly be his disciple. Do not imagine that this meeting will not happen. Do not imagine that the Guru was made up of the body and has disappeared into the void. There are more darshans to come, 100,000 meetings to happen, and a majestic promise to be fulfilled between Guruji and his beloved disciples. The promise of love, that the Guru and the disciple be united in the clasp of enmity. Clasp of eternity. We can keep a part of the promise by beginning to know ourselves. For the Sadguru, our Guruji is a mirror put up before our eyes so that we can recognize ourselves. The Guru, as the world itself shows, removes the darkness, goo of ignorance with the light, brew of wisdom. In this nation, sacred tradition, the Guru is put on a pedestal even higher than that of gods. He is seen as the sine qua non of the spiritual journey, about whom the tentative first-time climber and the stalwart spiritual mountaineer are both lost. He is not only the path, not only the gate through which the seeker goes, but also the goal, the top of the mountain. He is the pole star in the journey from darkness to light, from ignorance to self-illumination, and all the scripture of the world are but feeble commentaries on his nature. They are the fingers that point to the moon. But when you have Guruji's darshan, the moon is right before you, incandescent, if you choose to avert your gaze. Not once, but again and again, the light of truth is too strong for you. The Guru call is of the divine. Lake shivers with the form of its energy, and know that this energy is contagious, it is inescapable. Meeting the Guru or having his darshan is not like going for a social visit. It is like going to a war, knowing you are going to lose. It is like watching a fire burn. The house of your ego down. It is preparation to meet the highest. For the Sadguru robs men of his defenses. You cannot win over a Sadguru. The words, alas, you cannot put up an appearance before him. He knows the truth of your being, except that height. Nothing. Don't play games with him. When you come to him, it is not who you are that matter. It is not how confounded you are, or how dark your deeds were, or what promises of stainless you are now making. What matter is whether you have just said yes. That yes is the first most firm footsteps on the spiritual journey. That yes brings innumerable gifts. That yes clasps you to the Guru's being with a force that even death cannot sunder. That yes begins the Guru's entire clemency, his grace to you. and that yes is perhaps the disciple's only task. The rest of the journey is reaffirmation, footsteps by footstep, of the first step. That yes is the miracle, the rest are the miraculous details. An ancient prayer invokes the Gurus as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat Par Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha. The holy trinity of gods, for the Guru's being is limitless. He is not just the creator, Brahma, the preserver, Vishnu, the resurrector, Maheshwara, or God, absolute Par Brahma. He is all creation himself. He is a thousand-eyed, thousand-limbed, thousand-mouthed God. He is the seed, the spore, the sap, and the tree of life. No one knows him. The wise are silent about his nature. But before the mirror of the Guru, the disciple sees and knows. That seeing is the true darshan, all the rest and preliminaries that helps lead him there. That knowing is truly touching the Guru's feet, for in that moment of illumination that Guru is revealed with footsteps of Shraddha. The disciple's journey towards the Guru is very strange. The disciple is blind, he is ignorant and cannot see the path. He cannot move ahead on his own. It is the Guru who leads him on. Thus, the Guru is not only the goal of the disciple, he is also the guide, the one to whom we are attached with the rope of faith on a mountain climb. Trust, thus, is the first prerequisite. If you cannot trust the Guru, you cannot believe. Hence, even though the Guru is the fountainhead of spirituality, it has been advocated that the would-be disciple check out the Guru before wholeheartedly accepting him. The Buddha advised as much. Just as gold is examined through burning, cutting, and rubbing, so you should thoroughly test my teachings and accept them, but never out of reverence for me. Swami Vivekananda had such an attitude at first towards Sri Ramakrishna Paramahans. Once the young disciple wanted to test his master's statement that he was unaffected by money. So he put a coin below Ramakrishna's pillow. The Guru could not sleep that night. Vivekananda's test had merely proven the spiritual armor of his Guru. Rid of doubt, the disciple can then humbly approach the Guru. His relationship with his spiritual guide rests on a firm footing. He can entrust himself to his Guru in life as in death. Only after the strong foundation of trust or Shraddha has been laid is the spiritual superstructure built. Man has to realize anew that he is a spiritual being made in his image. The Guru prods the disciple to realize the divinity. A small story narrates how. A cub had been separated from his tribe of lions. He began to live with a sheep. In time, his behavior became exactly like theirs. He no longer roared. He bleated. A tiger saw him one day and was overcome by surprise. He caught hold of a still young cub and gave him a hard shake. What is the matter with you? The tiger roared. Why do you behave like a sheep? The terrified cub insisted that the tiger was mistaken. He was just a sheep. The tiger took the cub to a lake. The clear water reflected the cub's face. Immediately he realized that its true nature. The Guru's none too easy task is somewhat similar. He demolishes the apparatus on which our mistaken identity rests. We are his children, not creatures of mortal flesh and feverish blood. We are divine personages, clothed in hide, not desired like animal. We are soul encased in body, not bodies with souls. Such a turnaround occurs only when the disciple truly touches the Guru's feet. That is when his ego flees away from his self. Only then does he receive the spiritual charge that wakes him up. The Guru is a spiritual powerhouse, transmitting the current of spirituality into his disciple. At his graceful touch, the disciples awaken. Much preparatory work has to be done. However, we are laden with the psychological ferment and karmic package of lifetime. The powerful eddies generated by our karmas acting on minds not equipped with right attitude can break our legs even as the journey begins. So the Guru puts us in a situation where we learn life lessons armed with the eggs of right attitude. We hew our path through the many obstacles of life. The Guru's grace is never more evident when life comes up with a challenge or a test. At such times, to quicken the spiritual evolution of his child, the Guru can take the disciple's karma upon himself, elevating its misery, causing effects, sensing that we are about to set one foot on karmic crevasse. He lifts us up and carries us on his own shoulders. What economians, what economiums can be helped on such a guru? He can only be silently loved, fully followed. Yet there are times when the disciple descends his guru, the guru leaves no psychological stone unturned to perfect his spiritual son, but the disciple commitment wills as the guru operates on his mental makeup. Howsoever much the disciple may flinch from the guru's ego hurting blows, the guru, bent on the disciple perfection, carries his task through. As such weak moments, the disciple can't summon the will required to thwart his habit, but he need only realize that the guru is taking pains on his behalf. The guru's sole interest, unlike the self interest concealed in every human relationship, is the disciple. His only interest is to take the disciple Godward, whether he moves mountains of karma or to the disciple way to do this, whether he heals him of disease or of mental plagues, that is his wish. There are many means to the end of leading the disciple to God. The Guru selflessly spends a huge amount of energy and time in fashioning a disciple. The journey up the spiritual mountain is no picnic. Spirituality, as the Sadguru transmits, if it is not a comfort-giving philosophy, if it is not cosmetic cream that can make our social faces and psychological masks look more beautiful for the moment. It is not a set of rituals and rites that we can fulfill to gratify ourselves or to flatter God. The spiritual terrain is a life-consuming affair. It is not a path that one street can be walked out of. Once you are with a guru, once you accept his stewardship, you must go where he leads you. The guru is our only chance to reclaim our divinity. He is the ladder that leads to God. He is the one who grants us self-realization. Everything in his hand is a device, from how that escapes the crowd to how the positions his relationship with us. But at all time, he is our guru. No matter whether he is joking or lending on ear to the happenings of the day, he is our guru, first, foremost, and last. And only through pleasing him or through attempting to please him shall the disciple succeed in getting to his cherished goal. Remember also that the guru is not to be literally emulated. There is a story of Adi Shankara and a disciple who used to imitate each and every action of the great master. On a pilgrimage, the master stopped to take some alcohol from the hands of a peasant. The disciple, close on his heel, did so likewise, and probably with a great enthusiasm. Some distance ahead, the great Vedantist stopped again, molten iron and coming out of an iron foundry. Unconcernedly, Sri Shankara asked for the liquid, cupped his hand, and took a long sip. The disciple was disarmed. He could not follow his master now. The Guru's words have to be followed in letter and spirit, no doubt. Yet the disciple should not imagine himself with the Guru under any condition. It is much better to be continually engaged in lovingly remembering the Guru, the way the Guru and the disciples are always linked in spirit. Spirituality in the hands of the Guru is a weapon to disarm our ego unless we are ready to be thus mercilessly exposed. Do not seek a Guru or say you follow him. If you come to a Guru, rest assured that you will not receive continual ego massages. In fact, once you have fallen for a Guru, even slight indication of his favor may disappear. The greatness of the Guru lies in that he takes us as we are, warts and all. He loves us in spite of our blemishes. He sets no precondition for our entering his path, entirely self-sufficient, absorbed in cosmic bliss. He wants nothing, craves nothing in his vision. All are alike. He sees no distinction. He favors none. Like the sky, he compasses all without touching them. He is the eternal witness. His unblinking eye, steadfast on eternity, is intimate with each and every flowing thought in the stream of his disciples' mind. The Guru is the highest. He is incomparable. His grandeur is above even that of the lords of heaven. The sun, the moon, the stars are but encrustations of finite cosmic dust on his robe. The Holy Trinity, the countless gods and goddesses, the yogic powers are at his feet, ready to do his bidding. The Guru is God, the Guru is Shiv himself. In the Shiv Purana, the Lord Shiva denies Lord Brahma's plea to create beings bound by the mortality. He instead vows to descend on earth to remove such beings from the incessant dawn of birth and death. He came as Guruji in the dust of his feet. Ah, what a bliss! May Guruji have mercy on you and I. May the rain of his mercy fall on our foolish heads. May we throw the very charge of his being to be laid at his feet. So देखिए to having a guru in our life is very important, and in Shiv Purana also it's been written over there, and Bhagwan Shiv said once कि in Kali Yuga I will come in a form of guru. So कुछ कहने की कहते हैं इसमें कुछ संशय नहीं है कि यार गुरुजी महाराज incarnation of Shiv, और he has shown us so many miracles. We call it a miracle, but basically it's a blessing in so many forms to just tell us that he is an incarnation of Shiv. So with this, I'll just conclude this thing. From next time, we'll be reading the satsang which has been written in front of Guruji. So Jai Guruji, Shukrana Guruji.